Hi. In this lecture, I want to talk about some basic questions that everybody has related to Python. I want to talk about what Python is, how is it different from other programming languages? Is it a new language? Is it still as popular as it was a couple of years back? Is the popularity still strong, or are there a lot of competitors who are emerging? What are the limitations of working with the language? And also whether it is future ready. So, should you invest time and effort in your learning if you're looking at the next 10, 15, 20 years of your career? Now, Python is a programming language and it's a high level general purpose programming language. It is not a new language, it was created in 1991. And the reason Python has picked up a lot in popularity is because of its simplicity. Python uses something called white spaces, which I'll be talking about going forward, that makes it very simple in terms of the syntax and makes it very simple for people to learn and use it. So even beginners who have no programming or coding background do not find it difficult to work with Python. So the learning curve is very flat. In terms of popularity, if you look at the TOB index, TOB is an organization that comes up with a list of the top programming languages. You will see that Python has maintained its number three spot, especially compared against C and Java that are more multi-purpose. If you look at PYPL, PYPL looks at the popularity of programming languages and it is an index created by looking at how often do people search on Google about these languages. Here, there is no competition. If you notice, Python is the undisputed number one, which has a 31% share of searches on Google, which just goes to show you that it is not just the people who have already been programming, but the ones who are learning to program today. And Python is the one that they are most interested in. If you look at Stack Overflow, which is the number one developer community in the world, again, you would see that Python rates very highly at 41.7%. In terms of the job market, again, Python seems to have an upper edge over many other languages. In fact, as per the survey on Indeed.com, the only other language that had a higher average salary packet was Ruby. All the others were behind Python. So Ruby and Swift were incidentally greater than Python. All the others were behind it. Also, the interesting thing here is that Python developers typically earn a higher salary despite the fact that they have relatively low experience, which just goes to show you that Python developers need not have many years of coding experience. I've seen a lot of Python developers who have just been working for 2, 3 years and who earn a commensurate packet. In fact, a packet which is higher than commensurate and is higher than what people with more experience in other languages have. So there's no question about the popularity. The popularity is only going up, it is not coming down. But does it have competition? It does. Now, there are languages like Rust. So, I'm not talking about these in detail. You can read about this on your own. So, we have Rust, which is really picking up. Then we have a language called Julia, which again is making a lot of headway and it's growing by leaps and bounds. And then we also have a language that Google has created called Go, which is also very simple and is picking up a lot of pace. Now, does this mean that these languages will take over Python someday? It's very unlikely. And the reason for that is manifold. One reason is that languages never really die. So if you look at C and C++, these have been around for such a long time. And despite the fact that you have so many alternatives available, they're still there. People continue to work on them. Even if you look at a language like Visual Basic for Application, so if you ever Google VBA, you will see that Support for VBA was stopped in 2011, and a lot of people say that it's a dead language. But because VBA is what Microsoft Excel works on, which means that 750 million computers in the world have VBA installed on it, it will never really die. There are entire organizations and functions that rely on VBA for its work. In any case, with Python, you need not worry. Python is being used for so many different functionalities that it will remain the, if not the, but definitely one of the number one, two, or three languages in the world going forward. Of course, there would be different languages for specific tasks. For example, R might be better at hardcore statistical analysis. Power BI and Tableau might be more user-friendly when it comes to creating visualizations. But as a general purpose language, Python is definitely going to be there in the many, many years to come. Let's talk a little bit about the limitations. Now, the first limitation that a lot of people talk about is performance and speed. Now, of course, if you're working with smaller data sets, this is not a problem, but it's good to know that languages like Java and C++ are considered much faster than Python. So if you're a developer who works on very large data sets, let's say you're working on AI and ML, then the performance and speed might be something you have to keep in mind. There is also a problem with the incompatibility. Now, currently we're working on Python 3, but there is also a version called Python 2. And it is very important to know that there are certain frameworks and libraries that only work on Python 2, and they haven't made that jump to Python 3. Application portability is also an issue. Now, because Python is a high-level programming language, developers have to use what we call interpreters to convert a Python code into a code which is understandable by the operating system, which means that they have to install specific versions of this interpreter on their OS. So porting again is something that other languages do a little better, and Python is not the best at that. Python is also a dynamically typed programming language, something I'll talk about later, which means that it does not require programmers to define the data type while you're declaring it, which might be very handy for a programmer who's starting programming for the first time. But going forward, it might cause a lot of bugs at runtime. And this again is something the developer has to keep in mind. In terms of web development, uh, do understand that Python does not come with a built-in web development capability, and it's not the best at it. It is also weak at mobile computing because Python was never created to handle mobile applications, which means that you have to use other frameworks to create cross-platform mobile applications using Python. There is also quite a lot of reliance on third-party frameworks and libraries. And developers nowadays, when you're working on a large piece of code, they want to embed block comments. Again, something I'll talk about later. This again is something that Python does not allow you to do. There are also certain Python modules that lack adequate support. Now, the thing is that Python is supported by a very large and active community, which means that developers from this community share new packages and modules, and they make it easier for programmers to add new functionalities. But this also means that the quality of these modules might not be always the best. There are over 1,000 different libraries available, and some of them might not be fully tested and might not be compatible properly with the other systems. Also, in terms of hardcore statistical models, even though Python has a number of libraries that can do this, R is much better suited if you're looking at hardcore statistical analysis. So remember, while this might seem like a lot of limitations, you need not worry about it. These are limitations for specific use cases. This means that it's not that a developer will have all these limitations all the time, but it is good to know, and similar to how we have limitations for Python, every language will have its own limitations as well. So it's good to be aware of what Python is, what is it good at, what is it not good at, whenever you are suggesting a path to a client. So if the client is confused between using Python and R, you need to be able to tell them exactly what is Python better at and what is R better at. But to sum it up, Like I said earlier, you need not worry. Python is absolutely future ready. And as I showed you from all the surveys, Python's popularity only seems to go up every year. So while there is a lot of competition that is coming in, it will take years for people to migrate to that new language. In the next lecture, we will see how to download Python and how to download something called Anaconda, which will be a framework that will allow you to install the environment in which you can start writing your Python codes.